They say that when a king dies, the earth trembles. But on the night of February 28, 2026, when the missiles finally found their target in the heart of Tehran, the most terrifying thing wasn't the sound of the explosion. It was the silence that followed. For nearly 40 years, one voice dictated the dreams and deaths of 85 million people. But as the smoke cleared from the compound of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the city didn't wail, it held its breath. Imagine a girl in 1977, her hair catching the summer wind on a Tehran balcony, a world of French pop and Western poetry at her fingertips. Now look at her granddaughter today in 2026, standing in the same spot, hiding a smartphone under a jacket, watching the horizon burn as the supreme power of her world evaporates in a cloud of dust. Khamenei is dead. The island of stability has officially drowned, and the fire we see tonight, it wasn't lit by a Tomahawk missile. It was lit in 1979, and it has been consuming the soul of Iran for half a century. The war of 2026 wasn't born in a vacuum. It was born in the smoke of 1979. When the Shah fled and Ayatollah Khamenei landed in Tehran, the world saw a revolution. But the new regime saw a target on its back. Within months, the 444-day hostage crisis didn't just sever diplomatic ties with the West, it forged a narrative of eternal confrontation. For the revolutionaries, the world was no longer a partner, it was an existential threat. If the revolution was the birth, the Iran-Iraq War, 1980 to 1988, was the baptism. Iran learned a lethal lesson in those trenches. They could never win a fair fight. They lacked the jets of the Americans and the tanks of the Soviets. To survive, they had to stop fighting like a state and start fighting like a ghost. This was the birth of asymmetric warfare. Khamenei built a ring of fire to ensure the fighting never happened on Iranian soil. From Hezbollah in Lebanon to the Houthis in Yemen, Tehran exported its revolution. For decades it worked, but by 2025, that wall began to crumble. With the fall of the Assad regime in Syria and the systematic degradation of his proxies, the supreme leader was left exposed. The island was suddenly alone. By February 2026, the dream of the revolution had reached its ultimate, desperate conclusion: the bomb. The regime believed that nuclear weapons would make their ideology immortal, a shield that would allow them to rule for another 1,000 years. But they forgot one thing. A shield is useless if the person holding it has nothing left to lose. When diplomacy died in the cold rooms of Muscat last month, the West realized the regime wasn't negotiating for peace, they were negotiating for time. On February 28th, Operation Epic Fury was launched. A joint U.S.-Israeli force struck 49 senior leaders in the first wave. The decapitation was surgical. Khamenei was gone. The nuclear labs at Natanz were targeted. The great civilization was being dismantled from the top down. Before we continue into the final hours, if you find these deep dives into the hidden history of the Middle East valuable, subscribe and drop a comment. Thank you. But the regime's most dangerous enemy isn't the American B-21 stealth bomber or the Israeli F-35. It's the bazaar. In January 2026, the Tehran Bazaar, the economic and traditional heart of the 1979 revolution, did something it hadn't done in 47 years. It turned against the Ayatollahs. When the merchants who funded the first revolution shutter their shops, the theocracy isn't just losing a war, it's losing its pulse. Spurred by a collapsing rial and the woman, life, freedom defiance, the people are no longer waiting for a savior. Today, on March 3rd, the streets of 400 cities are filled with a generation that has lost its fear. They are doing the unthinkable. They are dancing at the funerals of martyrs. In the eyes of the IRGC, this is more than protest. It is a desecration of their entire moral universe. These Gen Z rebels don't want a reformed theocracy. They want the total dissolution of the Islamic Republic. They aren't fighting for a better version of 1979, they are fighting to erase it. The government is now fighting a two-front war, one against global superpowers and one against its own children. But the most terrifying front for the Supreme National Security Council is the one inside their own barracks. Intelligence reports from the last 48 hours suggest widespread mutinies in the Artesh, Iran's conventional army. Junior officers, many with sisters and daughters in the streets, are refusing orders to fire on protesters. The IRGC hardliners are now forced to use their elite units not to defend the borders against Operation Epic Fury, but to police their own soldiers. Every missile launched toward the Mediterranean tonight is a desperate distraction. It is the dead man's switch of a regime that knows its own house is on fire. The world is feeling the heat. With the Strait of Hormuz effectively a kill zone, global supply chains are snapping. Oil has breached the $180 mark. But in the shadow of the gas lines in the West, a deeper transformation is happening. For the first time in 50 years, the Iranian threat is being viewed not as a state to be contained, but as a people to be liberated. The ring of fire that Khamenei built has finally burned back to the source. The war of 2026 is not a war for territory. It is a war for the memory of what Iran was and the hope of what it could be. It is the final answer to the question asked in the smoke of 1979. As the sun rises over the ruins of the Tehran command centers tonight, 85 million people are finally looking at each other and realizing they are no longer afraid. The long night of 1979 is ending. Whether a new secular Iran rises from the ashes or the region descends into a dark age is the story being written in the smoke tonight. The fire didn't come from the sky, it came from within. And for the first time in half a century, the dawn doesn't belong to the Ayatollahs, it belongs to the children they couldn't break. As the smoke clears over Tehran on this March morning, we are witnessing more than just the failure of a military campaign. We are witnessing the collapse of an era. The war of 2026 was never just about nuclear centrifuges or hypersonic missiles. It was a battle for the soul of a nation that has been held in a revolutionary stasis for 47 years. The ring of fire that was meant to protect the leadership hall has finally burned back to its source. While the world watches the B-21s and the F-35s from above, the real change is happening on the ground, one tile of the mosaic at a time. The generation that was born into the long night is finally seeing the first light of a different dawn. The story of the new Middle East is being written in real time. If you want to stay ahead of the curve with deep dives into the geopolitics and hidden histories that shape our world, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Your support allows us to continue these intelligence-style briefings and bring you the stories the mainstream media often misses. The long night of 1979 is over. What happens next is up to the people who are finally no longer afraid. Don't forget to subscribe. Thank you for watching.